So in this internal training class that we did, it was really around semantic markup. And the goal of this project was to review this design here, which was basically putting cards onto a page. These cards had to do with some certain counseling resources that were available in our hypothetical client situation here. So before we get started in going into the review of how we can improve this and how we can make this better, I think the first thing that we want to think about is the mindset that we have when we approach a project like this. Now it's very easy. I'm very guilty of this. When I start the mindset of like, how do I want this page to look? I always feel a little bit like this, that, I'm Bob Ross and I have this big blank canvas and every project is my unique work of art that I get to create and design and to make it look fabulous. But the reality is we don't start with a blank canvas and we can't keep that mindset. Instead, we have to think that our canvas starts with a framework and a template that looks just like the theme that I need to put these cards onto. And so this helps keep our UI consistent. It helps keep us from every day having something new and amazing. And while those things might be amazing on their own, over time, as I go from page to page, it's going to start to look very cluttered and very confusing. So imagine if the Rock Core UI looked like that every page and block was a unique creation from that day and what we thought it should look like. It would really turn into kind of almost a garbage pit. Now, as we go through these UI concepts, it's easy to get overwhelmed and feel like this isn't, something that I'm good at. And I think keeping with the Bob Ross motif here, he has this really great quote that says, talent is a pursued interest. And this should be super encouraging because basically what he's saying is what looks like talent is just someone who's really pursued that interest, invested in it, tried to get better at it, and that really what looks like talent a lot of times is just effort. And so by applying some work and going along with some standard practices, we can actually get our UI to be really clean and really good looking. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about this term semantic markup. So semantic markup is basically the use of a markup language like HTML, which is in our case what we're going to use, to convey information about the meaning of each element in a document through the proper selection of markup elements, so the proper selection of which elements in HTML we're going to use, and maintaining a complete separation between the markup and the visual presentation of the elements contained in the document. So, okay, that might be a little confusing. So let's look at a great site that helps explain this. And this is a website called the CSS Zen Garden. And so if we look at this site, kind of the purpose of this is to show you semantic markup and to show you the separation between the markup and the styling. Okay, so if we look at this page here, we can see it has a nice title, a nice subtitle. Subtitle is The Beauty of CSS Design. It has some content. The Road to Enlightenment is one section. So what is this about is another section. And then over here are a listing of different ways that we can recreate or restyle this site in different kind of themes you can think of it. Now, as we go through this, just realize that the markup that we're going to see on the pages that I'm going to show you is exactly the same as this page. No changes to the markup, the same HTML, okay? The only thing that's changing is the CSS theme, okay? So this is going to show you that you can have very varying different types of looks with the same markup, okay? So here's another example, same exact markup, same order of markup, absolutely nothing changed, okay? Now you can see that our subtitle is actually made into the big title here, The Beauty of CSS Design. Our main title, they thought, well, let's put that over on the side. Let's flip it horizontal, or vertical, I should say. And they've added these other like embellishments all through CSS. Again, if we were to view source on the HTML, 100% the same. And here's that first section down here, The Road to Enlightenment. Here's another person's idea of what this page could look like. Again, same markup, just changing to CSS. And another, and then a really vastly different one. And again, HTML 100% the same. I would encourage you to go to this site and play around, look at the different styles out there, and then prove it to yourself. View the source and look at that. Now you might think that this concept of semantic markup is new, and it's really actually pretty old. CSS Zen Garden was established in 2003, and over the time, the only thing that's changed is different people have done different things with it using new CSS ideas. And for instance, if you were to look at this one I'm showing right here, it's all animated, like things are moving, and as you roll over things, they bounce around and do some really cool stuff. So the only thing that's changed on the site is the technology that is available to us through CSS. And so if we look at this, our page, like here, is a amalgam of HTML and CSS, right? A blending. And so if we pull that apart, which we want to do conceptually, we want to think that HTML is the content and CSS is the styling, and you don't want these two things to get kind of put together. You want to really keep the content on the HTML and the styling completely separate through CSS. Now, another way of looking at this, if you're still confused, is think about Word. There's a lot of different ways to approach Word. This is a very unstyled document. And so what some people might do, maybe who don't know how to use Word as advanced, would come in here and say, hey, I need to make these things headings, so I'm just going to highlight that, change my font, change my font size, make it bold. Then I come down to introduction, do the same thing. So what I've really done though is I've blended my content with my styling. Instead, what we should do is we should just use the built-in styles within Word. So if I highlight overview and then say H1 or heading 1, highlight introduction, say heading 1, I've not blended my styles into my actual content. I can come up here and I can easily change the styling of a H1 or heading 1, and it'll go through my whole document and change it for me. Okay, so there's a right way and a wrong way to do this in most content creation tools like Word. And so I would encourage you to, if you're going through here and putting your styles by using this area, I would encourage you to watch a YouTube video and learn about styles. It will change the way you do Word forever. Okay, so back to Rock, back to markup and semantic markup within Rock. Just realize that the person who's creating how something should look in your page is really the theme editor, not the content creator. Okay, so putting your theme and your styling rules in your theme and core CSS, that's good. Okay, that's where the styling should come from, the theme and the core CSS. Embedded CSS, so if you put like a little style tag into your block or into your HTML, that's something to be avoided. And even worse than that is inlining the CSS. So that's using the style tag like actually on an element to give it, some changing and some styling. That's actually even worse. So we want to avoid that. Now, every rule is going to have an exception. Okay, so that's what we have to realize. Sometimes there are exceptions, but in general, you should not be needing that and you should not be doing that. Now, there is a gray area. These helper classes that we've created, a lot of them come from Bootstrap, a lot of them that we've created too, are a great way of providing style. And are they good or are they bad? That really comes down to how you're doing it. And I would say that's kind of like a neutral area. You don't want to overuse them, but sometimes they can be needed or desired or helpful. And I'd say sometimes those helper classes are defining the semantic, what's the purpose of that element, almost as much as the markup. But in other cases, it's really an opinionated styling. So I would kind of see them as neutral. Don't start to overuse them, but in some cases they're good. And I'll show you some examples of both. Okay, so let's look back at our original design. So we have the cards showing our counseling opportunities. And the first thing I want to point out is especially when dealing with the internal theme, is that we should never put content straight on the background. Okay, so that's kind of an internal design rule that we do within the internal theme. If you want to do something different on your external themes, totally fine, totally great. On internal themes, we always put the content into a panel. Okay, and so this would be the after we've styled some stuff, we've made more changes, and obviously just putting it into a panel. We made some other styling changes that we'll go through and talk about. But the first thing we want to do is make sure that we always put things in panels when it's going to be used on the internal theme. So now if we compare our two examples side by side, you can kind of see our before and after. Now, one of the biggest things about the after is we're trying to swim downstream and use the styles that have been put in by the theme author of the internal theme. Some of the things you may not like as much, but that's okay. The theme author decided what those should be, and we should go along with it because consistency is always better than perfection on every single block. So for example, if I'm just looking at this, I would prefer this text here, these titles, to probably be maybe just a little bigger. I actually kind of like the size of these original ones, but honestly, that's not what the theme author gave me in this case. I had a couple different options. I could do an H1, H2, H3, H4, H5. I went through them and I found the best one that I thought was consistent with the rest of the blocks inside of Rock, and that's what I used. So, would I have preferred those to be bigger? Yes, but I'm not going to do it because I want consistency. And so that's a big differentiator between this. Now, before we go looking at more markup, I want to talk about one other quick thing that we were doing in this project, and that's how we passed in data to these blocks. So these are just HTML blocks. Actually, I think they are content channel item blocks. And one of the things that we were doing is we were passing in data like this through the routes. That's totally a good thing to do. A couple things that we need to do differently though is, one thing is we never want to filter on strings. So instead, we should have done something like this in our example. So now we're filtering on IDs. And so why is that? Because strings can change, IDs don't. Now you could make the case that whatever you're using to filter this, this Glendale was dynamically created on the previous screen, so therefore it's not going to change in the brief second that someone's using it. Still, not a best practice. Should always use either GUIDs or IDs or some other thing that is an identifier that does not change. Okay, so just a quick side topic to do that. In addition, we always want to use routes. So internal Triumph, we use routes. We want to try to remove things like this where the page ID is kind of just showing and all these query strings are there. Technically, that there's no difference, there's no improvement. It's just really user experience. So we've created nice routes here. Okay, let's head back to our original topic, which was markup. Now, if we look at the original, some of the other things that we've changed is the original had some embedded styles. And so these styles were, fairly opinionated. And we get it. Like we're trying to paint a blank canvas approach. And so we needed to provide some, additional paints. And so if you look at this, like the resource cards are going to have a border radius of 10. So that's great. So today we decide 10. Tomorrow I might think 12. And the next day I thought, well, it's more of a trend not to have radiuses. And so it's 0. Now I have all these styles all over my site that are inconsistent and I have to go change them in every single place. So no, what should be the case is the theme author tells us, what the card's radius should be. So in this case, the theme author is saying they should be 0. Now, I might not like that. I actually would prefer a little bit of roundedness, but it doesn't matter because the theme speaks for itself. And if I want to change that, I should go to my theme override and say all cards will have a border radius of 10. Therefore, I can only change it. I only need to change it in one place, and it gives me consistency. And now all cards look alike. The other thing I would kind of warn here is the use of important. bang important. When you do that, it's a little bit like a nuclear bomb. Like you're saying, this will always win. And then if you really want to get down into it, it's almost always wins. Specificity can trump it in some cases. But we got to be really careful with that bang important. It's kind of a mutually assured destruction when you're going to start fighting yourself over that. So whenever you're using important, trying to back up and say, well, why do I need this? Is it really needed? And typically it means that you're fighting against something, and you will always want to reconsider that. So especially if you're fighting against the theme, that tells you that I'm doing this wrong. I need to go back to my theme and make that change, not do it here. Okay, so in the top one, the after, we've completely removed the need for these styles. Okay. So next up, our first attempt also had a lot of helper tags being used. So we're using like border 0. So remember I said those helpers are kind of a gray area. This is a very dark gray area because we're saying we're kind of trumping the theme with them. Rounded, large, again, we don't want to be doing this. Shadow, I'd probably say same thing. That should be coming from the theme. Then we get into like the height 100. Of course, that's fine because we're basically just trying to make all of our cards the same size. And cursor pointer. So here we're making the cursor look like it's make the card look like it's clickable, but it's really not. This again should not be here. This should be created by some kind of click, markup, like an anchor tag. Don't put that there. It's just going to confuse people, and you shouldn't have to once it is truly clickable. Okay, so then we start going into the card body. So these card ones are great because this is what's making it a card. This padding top 0, your spacing helper classes are truly in the middle of the gray. In this case, I'd hope it wouldn't be needed. But when you start coming down here and saying you want margin bottom 2 on the title, I'd say that's actually okay because you're basically saying, hey, I need separation here. And it's kind of, again, like a mid-gray. It's like, is that Semantic? No, you should probably, in the perfect world, create a helper class that kind of does that for you. But in this case, I would vote that's okay. So anyways, a lot of these helper classes here, not necessary and not needed. Okay, so let's go to actually looking at the cards from more of a design perspective. Okay, so we have our before over here, we have our after over here. A couple things that I would recommend changing, and that I did change over to here, is first, getting these things to align would be really, really nice. This looks a little sloppy when it wraps underneath. They don't look like perhaps little bullet points. Also having extra white space between the title and the contact information, I think is super helpful. One of the things I highly recommend that you do when you're working on designs is, and it sounds a little silly, but close your eyes, try to remove all of your knowledge of what is being designed and open your eyes, and then watch where your eye goes. And so we'll see a little bit later, we're actually gonna do that experiment, and we'll see that having this separation really makes this title more scannable. Here we've muted the text just to kind of give a little bit more separation, a little bit more hierarchy between saying that hey, this is more important than this. Use this, eyes, use this to kind of do your filtering, and let's kind of push this back a little bit. And then it's a little bit hard to see in this design, but this is actually a smaller text. Okay, the before and after is not quite perfectly scaled, but this is smaller. Again, just saying, hey, this is even less important. Now, one of the things in our first go-around of this was that we had some markup that looked like this. And so this is really bad from a semantic perspective, because we're basically saying, hey, theme designer, you said H4s, whatever you said is fine, but I don't like you. I'm actually going to make it strong. So we're really fighting against that theme. Hey, if the person who designed the theme didn't want the H4s to be bolded, then don't do it. Don't go there. Either pick another H number or go to the theme and change it there. But This is like really fighting against semantic concepts and really fighting against your theme author. Now I mentioned that contact information being lined up and trying to get that all lined up. And I was going to go make that actually work. And I was thinking, wow, this is actually really hard. I'm kind of fighting against this. I'm having to make a whole bunch of new markup. And every time I run into that, when I start fighting against something, I'm like, wait, stop. There's probably another way to do this. And so as it turns out, there actually is. Font Awesome has already solved this for us. Because that was kind of my thought. I'm like, well, actually, all I'm trying to do is replace the bullets with Font Awesome icons. That's all I want to do. Is there a way to do that? So, quick Google. Yes, definitely. First item. There, the guys at Font Awesome already solved that. Here is the markup for that. And I just copy and pasted it right from their site. Just in all transparency, I was moving fast. There is one thing here I don't like, and that's this embedded style. Remember I said that was horrible. Trying to get everything aligned, I had to do this. I do feel though if I put just a little bit more time into this, I could actually get rid of this, and we should. Like, this is not a good thing. This would probably break as the theme changes its design. But just going through here, trying to help provide some direction. This is my quick pass to make that there. But again, I really do think we could work that out of being needed. Okay, so I want to go back and talk about the scannability. So let's go back to here. And again, this is where we're going to take our quick exercise, and we're going to kind of close our eyes and look first at this one, and then we're going to close our eyes and look at this one. So if you close your eyes and open it, look where your eye's going and look at the scannability. Your eye's trying to figure out and scan across these titles. And that's the most important information. Now, do the same thing, except do it on this one. And I think you'll find that your eye scans naturally more. One of the things that you want to do in your design is you want to group like things, and you want to create hierarchy for your eye. And so what we've done on this one is created that hierarchy by making this bold, and then creating the groupings, which also creates the hierarchy. And by making this more muted or light, it also creates hierarchy, so it pushes it back. Now, someone's never going to come here and say, oh, this text is lighter, but your mind and your eye know that, and as you do the scanning, it makes it much easier to scan across that. Okay, so this was one internal training class we did on semantic markup, and just trying to do a quick before and after type review of some markup that we were getting ready to do potentially for a client. And we wanted to share it out with the community so that we can make everybody better at rock.